the time we're going, and we don't know where. Um, and if purpose or teleology or intention implies knowing where you're going, well, Simon and Garfunkel are singing right there about modern science's declaration that biological evolution is basically purposeless, that it has no direction and no goal, no point. In other words, there's no progress. So, I haven't even read this yet, but I'm going to read the section from Ernst Mayr's book, What Evolution Is, called Does Selection Lead to Progress and Ultimately to Perfection? And, Ernst Mayr is, the back of the book, it says, Mayr has been hailed as one of the great shining figures of evolutionary biology. And John Maynard Smith said that, who is another person who has been hailed as one of the great shining figures of evolutionary biology. So he's obviously in the center of the scientific establishment when it comes to understanding what evolution is. He's a neo-Darwinist. If you want the scientific view, it's this guy you're going to ask. So let's see what he has to say about teleology, or about the idea of progress in evolution. In the 18th century, it was widely believed that the world was perfectly designed by God, and that even where such perfection had not yet been achieved, he had instituted laws that would ultimately lead to it. This belief reflected not only the thinking of natural theology, but also the optimism of the Enlightenment, as well as the teleological thinking, also known as finalism, that was so widespread in that period. Lamarck's theory of evolution, for instance, postulated a steady rise toward perfection. Modern evolutionists reject the idea that evolution is able, ultimately, to produce perfection. Yet most of them believe that some sort of evolutionary progress has occurred since the beginning of life. The gradual change over time from bacteria to unicellular eukaryotes and finally to flowering plants and higher animals has often been referred to as progressive evolution. Such terminology has been used particularly often with reference to man as the end stage of a series leading from reptiles through primitive mammals to placentals and finally to monkeys, apes, and hominids. At one time, the idea was almost universally held that man was the culmination of creation, and that anything was progressive that led in the direction of man's perfection. Doesn't the series from bacterium to man indeed document progress? If so, how can such seemingly progressive change be explained? In recent years, a number of books were published debating the existence or validity of evolutionary progress. There is great dissension on this question because the word progress has so many different meanings. For instance, those who adopt teleological thinking will argue that progress is due to a built-in drive or striving toward perfection. Darwin rejected such a causation, and so do modern Darwinians, and indeed no genetic mechanism was ever found that would control such a drive. However, one can also define progress purely empirically as the achievement of something that is somehow better, more efficient, and more successful than what preceded it. The terms higher and lower have also been criticized. For the modern Darwinian, it is not a value judgment, but higher means more recent in geological time, or higher on the phylogenetic tree. But is any organism better by being higher up on the phylogenetic tree? Progress, it is claimed, is indicated by greater complexity, more advanced division of labor among organs, better utilization of the resources of the environment, and better all-around adaptation. This may be true to some extent, but the skull of a mammal or bird is not nearly as complex as that of their early fish ancestors. Critics of the concept of progress have pointed out that in some ways bacteria are at least as successful as vertebrates or insects, and therefore why should vertebrates be considered progressive over prokaryotes? The decision as to who is right depends largely on what one considers to be progress. If one looks at the evolutionary series, one cannot deny that some recently evolved taxa have adaptations that were particularly successful for survival. Warm-bloodedness, for instance, permits an organism to cope more successfully with climate and weather fluctuations than is possible for ectotherms. A large brain and extended parental care permit the development of culture and its transmission from generation to generation. Each of these advances has been the result of natural selection, with the survivor having had an advantage over the non-survivors. In this descriptive sense, evolution was clearly progressive in certain phylogenetic lineages. It was as progressive as the development of the modern motor car from such early types as Ford's Model T. Each year, the manufacturers of motor cars adopted new innovations, and these were then exposed to the selection pressure of the market. Many models with certain innovations were eliminated. The successful ones formed the basis of the next level of innovation. As a result, the cars improved from year to year, becoming safer, faster, more durable, and more economical. Surely the modern car represents progress. If we consider a modern car as representing progress over the Model T Ford, we are equally justified to call the human species progressive compared to lower eukaryotes and prokaryotes. It all depends on how we interpret the word progressive. However, Darwinian progress is never teleological. Many definitions of evolutionary progress have been offered. I particularly like the one that emphasizes its adaptationist nature. Progress is a tendency of lineages to improve cumulatively their adaptive fit to their particular way of life by increasing the number of features which combine together in adaptive complexes, according to Richard Dawkins. So I'm going to stop there and let's, I'm really interested by when Mayr says that Darwinian progress is never teleological. And I guess by that, what he really means is it doesn't occur with foresight. Natural selection is a subtractive process. It is negatively shaping the way that organisms evolve. So it takes away certain types of phylogeny or certain species of organisms when they do not conform with its pre-given conditions. So it's an attempt to explain life only in terms of what it is not, or in other words, in terms of successful genetic replication. But nothing is said in this attempted explanation about what genetic replication really means.